Alright gang, we're going to do a new tutorial. We're going to make another WPF application. The last one, all it did is display a message and it had a button. That was pretty boring. Yeah, you get fired if that's all you do is make things that display little messages. So we're going to write one that supports data entry. It's going to have a text field so you can type stuff into it. And again, I like working with the WPF applications because in the real world you're going to want to create WPF, you're going to want to create GUI apps, right? Graphical user interfaces. So let's get going. Going to make a new C# project, not C++. Windows Desktop WPF. I think I'll call it Lecture C, just to be creative. And by the way, if you ever just get an error message when you click OK, or it doesn't even do anything, click Browse and set your project folder to another place. That was happening to half the students in the last lecture. I don't know what changed. The other half were still doing fine. And what do you know? Another project already exists in there because I did a C++ lecture with the same name. I'm going to be super careful and clever and call this C# lecture. You don't have to do that. Alright, before we really begin, I want to show you something that I think I meant to show you last time, but I didn't. If I do something like this, if I grab a label and drag it out, you don't have to do this because I'm probably just going to undo it immediately. You see there's some text here, right? I can scroll down to this little XML window, and if I zoom in, I see that my label is there. Label. The content is label. I could change it right here rather than change it there, like if I wanted to call it message, right? Instead of label. It changes it immediately as soon as I make that change. What if you don't like the font? Well, it doesn't seem to be specifying a font, but I know that if I go into properties, I could change the font. Right click. Oh, I don't see properties. Probably over here. So if I do view. Oh, great. I'm going to stumble around looking for this. Well, firstly, I'm going to open up the Solution Explorer. Alrighty, and so the Properties window, I'm going to select this text. It's under View, Properties window. It's hidden way down at the bottom on my screen, so I didn't notice it. Alrighty. And here I get my little properties. I could drag it out if I wanted more room. And I will see that I could change the appearance of the text, right? I don't like Sego UI, although that's what Microsoft uses now. I wanted the text to be bigger, 48. I wanted to change the text to Shruti. Okay, so then if I dock this back over here, right, if I dock this back over here, well, that kind of looks dumb. Grab this and pull it down, put it at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, I like that. Okay, and now we look at the label. We have some more attributes, right? It's saying font size 48, family Shruti. What if I don't want it to be font size 48? I can edit that. Maybe you can't see that. I need to zoom in a little bit more so that people in the video can see it. I want it to be half as big. I'm going to change that to 24. It made it smaller. What if I really decide I don't like Shruti and I'm going to change it back to Sego UI, S-E-G-O-E-U-I? Is that, did I get it right? I don't know if I got it right. How about Courier? I still probably didn't get it right. Anyways, so you can edit the settings directly there. I wonder if I can even delete that one by coming in here and just deleting that entire line. Yep, I deleted it and I hit Control-S to save and it wiped it out. So you can edit the XML directly. You could add controls to it by typing stuff in here rather than dragging them out. Now, honestly, it's easier to drag them out at this point, right? Okay, so I'm starting fresh. Delete that object if you copied me. Just click on it. Just click on it, hit the delete key. It's gone. And let's go back to the instructions. I loaded up the instructions for tutorial C. All right. So I'm going to click my mouse on the button control and holding the mouse button down, drag a button onto the application window. We did this last time. So it's under Common WPF Controls. It's also under All WPF Controls, but Common is a good subset. Common WPF Controls, grab the button and keeping the button down, pull it. Alright, and then do the same thing, selecting a label and dragging it onto the window. Alrighty, a label is just some text. I'm going to pull some text out there. I'll move this stuff around when I'm ready. So I'm not taking a lot of care at this point where to put it. Alright, so setting the properties of our fields. Select the text field, right-click on it, and choose Properties. Well, I think I established that we can't do it that way anymore. Right? But I'm going to... Did I see a step that's missing? Oh, I need a text box. Step 4. I skipped that one. Okay. So we want a button, a label, and a text box. Grab the text box. You would think I could find it since they're alphabetically ordered. Alrighty. There's my text box. And I can see all three of the things down here. Now when I actually run the application and I hit the tab key, the tab, the cursor focus, is actually going to go in order that they are down here. So if I wanted to rearrange them, well, I would put them in the right order, by dragging them, but then I might, cut and paste them down here in the XML as well to make sure that, when the tab key is working, if it seems odd, then I might swap two places. Okay, so now we're going to change the properties. Select the text field, right-click on it, choose Properties. Let's see if that works this time. There's my text field. Right-click on it, choose Properties, and it's not there. Maybe it's on 2017, but it's not there. I need to modify the instructions. So select the text field, and then look at the Properties panel. If you don't see the Properties panel, I don't know why they took that out. Select Properties under the View menu. And then the Properties window should show up in the bottom right of the screen. You can drag it around if you want. Alright, it's got a dumb name right now. We're going to rename the text field Text Input. So, I'm going to select Text Box. I could rename it down here in the XML, but right now it doesn't have a name. I'm going to change the name of that to Text Input. I think my document had me put in a capital I. Whatever. Variable names are just for our purposes. We could call it Fred if we wanted to, and it would work just as well. Alright. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to rename the button Calculate. We're going to rename the Label Output. Now you may notice something. When I rename things, I tend to put the type of the control in the name. If it's a text field, I put text in front of it. If it's a button, I put the word button in front of it. If it's a label, I put the word label in front of it. That's just my quirk. You don't have to do it that way. You could just call it output and calculate and input. But I like being able to see when I'm editing the code exactly what type of control I'm controlling. And if I see the word button calculate, I know that I am modifying, issuing calls to the button. Okay, stop editing the Word doc, Jeff, and let's actually go and change the stuff. So what did I want to call this one? I wanted to call the button calculate button, or button calculate. So I click it, I go over to Properties, which as a reminder you find under View, Properties window. F4 seems to do the same thing. Alrighty. And under name, I'm going to change it to button calculate. Hit enter. You'll notice that there's this little lightning bolt here. We'll talk about that at a future point. Denise can't see it because this is cutting off the edge of the screen, but it's there, I promise. There's a lightning bolt there. These are called events. You can make it so that if you click on a button, it does something special. Well, we sure are going to do that. Or if you drag something on top of the button, it does something special. We'll get back to that at a certain point. In fact, we'll do it pretty soon. All right. And lastly, what was our label supposed to be called? It was supposed to be called label output. And then it says, find the content property and change it to result. So not only are we going to change the name of the label, we're going to change the text of it that's inside it to result. And they call the text of it inside of it content. So I'm going to select the label. I'm going to change the name of it to label output. And then I'm going to scroll down until I see content. And under content, ooh, what did I say I was going to make it? My memory shot. Result. Okay. So down here under content, result. And if I wanted my result to be displayed in red, nope, that's not right. There's another place where you change the appearance of it, right? Right here under Appearance tab. That still doesn't see where you change the text. Well, if I can't find a setting, I just type it into the little search field here, and I see that it's a Sego. See, I almost spelled it right. Sego space UI, and set the size of it. All right, so here's what my input window looks like right now. It's kind of silly. I might want to resize the window. I can probably do that. No, it's not letting me do that. Oh, yeah, there we go. I'm going to drag the fields around when I see how it works. I might put the result underneath the button. I'm going to go ahead and do some of that stuff. I'm going to put the button over here, the text box next to it, and the result underneath it. I'm probably going to wind up stretching the result out. We're going to see if that's large enough to contain what we want to do. There are a couple of little teeny tiny buttons down here. I hope they're in 2017 as well. Show Snap Grid. Alright, it puts a grid down there. And you can turn on snapping so that as you drag things around, it forces it to be on those even lines. That can help you just line things up if you want. I'm going to turn the grid back off, turn the snapping back off. See if there's anything else that's fun. I don't see anything else I want to put right there. Swap panes. I want to put the XML up at the top. I can do that. I'm going to put it down at the bottom. So we have an input field, a button, and a label. Now let's code what the button does. And we know how to do this. We've done it in the past. Double click the button. This will bring you to the source code editor. Now the first thing I'm going to do, or one of the things I'm going to do, is make a mistake. I'm going to double click on something I don't mean to double click on. You see this result label. I'm going to double click on it. Yeah, it didn't do what I was expecting. No, it's still churning. I still have my little cursor. Maybe it's gonna, maybe it's not. It didn't do what I was expecting. Maybe I'm thinking of the Java editor. I'm going to double click on button, which is the right thing to do, and it creates a method for the button. Here it says button calculate click. If I name the button Fred, it would say Fred underscore click. When the click method is called, it passes the sender to it, and it passes the event to it. We can inspect those things if we need to in order to accomplish certain tasks. And this is going to be a pretty simple method. We don't need to do anything complicated like that. Now skip to the next page. Why do I have that there? That's kind of silly. So when we edit it, we're going to put some code between the curly braces. And this is the code that we're going to put. That's a lot of code. We're probably going to wind up copying and pasting it, but I want to take a look at it after we do that to make sure we understand what it's doing. So I want all of that, and if you didn't have the document open, I would do so. And I should delete the PDF because I found that when people copy and paste text out of a PDF, sometimes it doesn't really work well. So there we go. I highlight all that stuff. I right click, I choose copy, I go back into here, and I'm going to paste this inside the button click. Alright, so what is this doing? Well, we know what strings are. SN and SOut. When the button is clicked, it needs to read the text in. And so it's going to store it in a variable called SN. And then when it's ready to display it, it's going to store the output in a string called SOut. And we're going to be dealing with numbers, so I made two numbers as well. D standing for double. DIN is going to hold the input number, which is what they type in the text input field after we convert the string, the input string from it. And then when we're ready to display our result, we're going to store it in the dout variable, and then we're going to convert it back to text. I believe that's what we're going to do. Okay, then what does this line do? It pulls the text out of the text input field, text input box. Now, this kind of looks funny if you've done some other programming. Why? Because you would expect it to look like this. And don't make this change. Text, parentheses, in parentheses, or get text, or something like that, right? It should look like it's a function. Instead, it's a property, which means that it gets the text out of it without a function call. Behind the scenes, there may be a function call. But anyways, so I'm going to leave it .text. And then it does this. Bool BOK is equal to double.tryparse. Now, if you've done Java programming or Python, you've seen that when you call some kind of parse function, like you try to convert it to an int or a double, but they've typed in some garbage, it can generate an exception and crash your program. So C# gives us a function which attempts to do the conversion, but if it fails, it doesn't generate an error. Instead, it just sets the Boolean variable equal to false. Yeah, we're going to close the door here. That's kind of annoying. So whenever you convert a string from a string to a number, use Tryparse. If you want to turn it into an integer, don't use double.tryparse. Use, int or integer.tryparse. And if you're turning it into a float, use float.tryparse. So we use double tryparse. SIN is the input string. Now, why are we using a string for our input? Because any text input field is always coming into you as text. You can't tie it as a number. So this pulls it in as text, which is a string, and then we try to parse on the string, and the result is going to get stored in this variable. Now we see this little mystery word out here. Kind of accept on faith that we need that word. What it means is that this function can change the contents of that variable. And that may look strange to you if you're a Python or a Java programmer, because in those languages, those are passed by copy languages, meaning that a copy of this variable gets passed in there, and so the function itself cannot change it. But if we stick the word out in front of it, it tells the function that it can change that value. So if this function succeeds, we're going to have a good value in our double here. If the function fails, it's going to return a false here. So that's what we do here. We check. We check to see if it returned a true or a false. If it returned true, we can use that variable that it returned here in this out field, in this out parameter. And that's what we do here. So we create a double, which is just based on DIN star DIN, right? We're multiplying the input number by itself, and we're storing it in our output variable. and then we turn it into a string. Why? Because like I said, input text fields on a form are always strings, so are labels, which are output text fields. The way string.format works is it uses the same placeholders that we saw when we were using console.write. So it's going to say the first variable squared is equal to the second variable. And we see it displaying the input number and we're seeing the output number. But we only want to do this stuff if double.tryparse returned a successful value. And so that's why we have this check. If BOK is just a concise way of saying if BOK is equal to true, right? But this is kind of an amateur kind of thing. Don't put the equal true. We're getting above that now. I'm going to take that out. Else, we're going to show a message box saying invalid input. Input must be a number. And then we're going to change the string to invalid input. Input bit must be a number. I feel like rearranging this just a little bit. I'm going to delete this message box.show, but then I'm going to retype it below the string out command. Feel free to do this. We create our output string, and then we're going to call message box.show parentheses s out. So we build the string and then we display it. Now notice that IntelliSense here was popping up a whole bunch of options here. There are 12 different variants of the message box.show. Those are called overloaded methods. The simplest one, you just do what we did. You call show and you pass in some text. But there's a version where you can pass in some text and then a caption. Maybe we'll play with what that looks like. There's a version where you can give it a window owner. We don't need that. There's a version where you can give it a caption and then you can pick whether the message box looks like an error window or something like that. We might play with the caption. I'm not going to tab through all these, but you can see that there's a whole bunch of different versions. What's this line do? Label output.content. Well, we've created our string. Our string either contains some good text upon a successful execution or it contains an error message. And now we're setting the contents of our label equal to the string that we build. So .content is how we change the text. Notice the input field we use .text, but then for the output field we use .content. Not sure why they distinguished them like that. All right, and that's the end of our method. Maybe we want to put, a little comment here. End button click method. If you see an error here, label output.content, it's probably because this label here has a different name. That name in the code has to match this one exactly. Like if I called it label output and it was all lowercase, then when I went to my code, I'm going to hit Control S to save it. When I went back to my code, this would be an error, right? And I would have to change it to match exactly. Say I don't even remember what it's called. I can pop up a list of all of the controls on the screen by typing this dot, and then I can scroll up and down, right? And since I called it label, I could eventually find the things that begin with an L, right? Label output. I could pick it like that. That fix it for you? Okay, okay. Same is true for if the input text field isn't working. Just make sure this matches exactly the name of the input text field that we set in properties. And the button. Actually, we don't use the button control in this one. It's creating the event, but we don't modify it. We could change the text of the button so that it displayed something else. The name button is kind of lame. Shouldn't we have set it to like square to represent what we were doing? I think so. I'm surprised my instructions didn't say that. So I'm going to click the button. I'm going to go over here. And I feel like changing the name of it. Not the name, the contents of it. So I need to find the contents of it. I'm not finding the contents of it. Oh, that's because I have this search field filled. I'm going to undo my search field, and then I should be able to see my content. Nope, my text. If I don't find it instantly, I'm going to stop fussing with it. I'm going to drag this out, make it large. Ah, right here. Now when I did a search on content, I didn't find it. But under common, you see content, we could change the name of the button, the text of the button, to say square. Notice this is enabled choice. If that was deselected, they wouldn't be able to click on it, and the button might be grayed out a bit. And we're not going to do that. Okay, so now it says square. Because I selected it, I went down to the common property and found content. And I'm going to drag this window back over here and dock it. Alrighty. I wonder if it's ready to run. Let's see if I had any further changes. Compile and debug the program. Okay. And then I have a notice. Note that the output label is probably not wide enough to display the error message or even the success message. Let's find out. So I'm going to project rebuild solution. I could have just clicked the debug message and it would have built it anyways, but it makes me feel good to rebuild it completely. It says rebuild all succeeded. Feeling good about that. So I'm going to click start, and here we go. Now it's teeny tiny controls. Maybe I want to create it. And here's something I don't like. When I resize it, it erases my text. I'm not sure how I'm going to fix that. We'll play with that. But anyways, so there's something that says result, there's something that says square, there's something that says text box. I don't like it saying text box because if you click square and that's the input, then we're going to get an error. Invalid input. Input must be a number. You know what, I think I would like to change this first and then display the error. Why? And let me show you what I'm thinking. If I run it again and I click this and it generates an error message, I'd like for this to change immediately as well as seeing this rather than wondering why. We could fix that by changing the order of the code. Okay, I'll be right there. Okay, so what I'm going to do before I go and help folks, oh, I see what happened. When I resized it, apparently I set some margin here. I set the internal margin rather than the size of the box. So I'm going to change the size of the box, the margin, back out there. And I'm going to try to resize both of them at the same time if I can. No, look at that. Haven't I messed that up? Take a look at that, Denise. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Well, what happens if I run it like that? Yeah, that's cool. No, it's not cool. All right, I'm going to undo that change. Anyways, I've messed up the margin, but I'm sure that I could fix it. Nope, there, I think I got it. Okay, pause the recorder. Oh, so changes I would like to make to this. One is that I don't want it to say text box when it loads up. And I should have made that a change, and I didn't. So, let's, not in the instructions, but we're going to do it anyways. How about 1? Let's fill it with the number 1 or something like that. So what do we got to do? We got to check this, and then we have to find the content, which I think we said was under common. So I'm going to go down to common, and where it says text box, I'm going to put in a number of like 0 or 1 or something like that. How about 2? 2 squared is 4. They'll see immediately what it's doing. All right. That's one thing. I'm going to test it out, see if I like the way that looks better. All right, so if I click 2, 2 squared is 4. I like that better. All right, as I mentioned, if you get an error, I would like for it to update this field before I would like to update the result before we get the error. I mean, before it displays the message box, right? So I'm going to type in some garbage here, click square, and right now it still says result. So even if, if I put something valid there and then I square it, but then I type in some garbage, I don't want it. I don't know. Maybe I like it like that. Not sure. But if I want to change the order of it, let's go back to the code. I'm going to go back to main window.xml.cs, or I could find it over here. And I'm going to change the order in which that happens. No, I guess I'm not. I'm not going to mess with it. Why? Because I'm not setting a content until after the if block, and I don't want to change the contents of the label inside the if block. I could blank it out before we do anything. Let's do that. We're going to blank it out. So above the if statement, or maybe even at the very top of the method, this dot label output dot content. Did I have to use this? No, but I liked it popping up. Is equal to empty string. Control S to save it. I'm going to run it. When I click square, it's going to blank this out. And it says 2 squared is 4. If I type in some garbage and click square, it blanks it out. Then when I click OK, it goes ahead and fills that in like it's an error message. Okay, I'm getting happier with my application here. Other things I would like to do that it's not doing is I probably want this text to be highlighted, especially if it's an error, right? If you type in some garbage and you click square, after you click OK, it would be really neat if the cursor was already there so I didn't have to highlight it again. Now I could do that. Do I want to demonstrate how to do that? Let me pause, remind myself how to do it. Alright, turned out not to be that difficult. When I Googled it, the suggestions for doing this looked really horrible. But I took a stab at the simple solution and it seemed to work, so I want to go ahead and do that. So down at the bottom of our button calculate method, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a dot focus method on the text input field. And the reason I'm doing that is focus is where the cursor is. I'm going to try to change the focus so that it's on the text input field so that if they want to change that number, it's easy for them to do so. So this dot text input, now on mine, maybe not on yours, it's showing 2 different versions of text input. One's got a lightning bolt on it and one's got a little box. We don't want the lightning bolt. That's an action. That's a method of some kind. We want the one with the little box because that's the variable. That's the object. So I choose that and then dot focus, parentheses and parentheses. So what we're doing is after we display and we make all of our changes to the window, we call textinput.focus to put the cursor back there. Give it a shot. Alright, so say I type some garbage and then I click square. Invalid input. Input must see a number. See, my cursor's back there and it wasn't before. You could comment this out, run it again, and you would see that to be true. Why don't we do that? See, cursor's not there. So you can change where the cursor is on your form via your code, and that can be useful. Like if they click save, then maybe you're going to want to clear out all the text input fields, and then you're going to want to put your cursor back up at the top text fields so that they can start entering new data. I'm going to uncomment that, and we are actually done with the assignment. Oh, one more comment I want to make is that some people don't like applications that pop up dialog windows. They'd rather just show the error message on the screen rather than pop up a big window. If we didn't like that message box, the customer complained about it, we could just comment it out. And then when we ran it and we typed in some invalid input, when we hit square, it would just say invalid input, input must be a number. That way they don't have to click OK. I kind of like the way that works better. I may leave it like that. You can undo that commenting out and make the message box show up, or you can turn it in like this. Alrighty, now I'm going to turn in the project. So I'm going to come over here to the solution. I'm going to right click on it, do Open Folder in File Explorer. I'm going to go up a level so that I can zip everything, or you can drill down. If you drill down though and only give me the CS, I'm not going to be able to open the project because it's got a whole bunch of extra files that go along with it, like this XAML. If I right click on that XAML and I click like something like Open with TextPad, here's that XML. So we can make changes like that, but if I don't have that in your submission, I'm not going to be able to open it inside Visual Studio and test it out. So I'd rather you zip it and take a screenshot. But anyways, so I'm going to do that again. Right click on the solution, open file in File Explorer. I'm going to go up a level to C++ projects. I'm going to find my Lecture C. I'm going to send it to a zip file. Send to compressed folder. Somewhere there should be a zip file now that I've done that. Okay, put it down at the bottom. And that's going to be what you upload. Alright, let's talk about homework. Alright, so our homework. Is this really homework 2? Yep, it is. Okay, I don't need to rename the file. Let's take a peek at it. Alright, WPF multiplication multiplication program. Create a WPF application, place 2 text fields onto the window, not just one, and then add a button that says multiply. Have a label that will display the result. Add code by double-clicking on the multiple button, and when the user chooses the multiply button, why don't we delete one of those double words, the application should take the values from the text fields, multiply them, and display the resulting value. Alright, this is slightly more complicated than our lecture because your professor's evil. Let's actually think about what we need to do. We're going to have a second text field, right, because we're multiplying 2 numbers together. So you're going to drag out a second text field, text box, right? You're going to give that one a better name than no name. Input 2, something like that. Then when you create, you're going to have a multiply button. When you create that multiply button and you double click on it to edit the text, well, I guess it's not wanting me to do that, but I know it would have if it was a new one. You're not only going to pull the string out of one text field, you're going to pull 2 strings out, right? And you're going to create 2 variables like D1 and D2. So S1 might be the first text input field. You pull out like that. Text 2, would be the second input field. And then you're going to do 2 conversions. Double.tryparse on the first string, double.tryparse on the second string, and you're going to store those in 2 different variables. Then you better make sure that both of them worked. So you might do a Boolean BOK1 and another bool BOK2 for your second tryparse so that you can display an error message, or you could do your calculation. So hopefully that makes sense. If you get stuck, send me a text, send me email. Text is faster. If you send email and I don't respond pretty quickly, send me a text anyways to say, hey, go look at my email. Alright, I hope that makes sense. That makes sense to you? Alrighty. Alrighty, and then I'll see you next time. And for those who are attending lectures, Monday is Labor Day, so we're not going to be here. So there'll probably only be one lecture for next week.